before that, let's talk about Arsenal against Real Madrid. Now, Real Madrid will be favourites. Let's not mess about. We have to work out how much of a chance Arsenal have, particularly the return of Bukayo Saka. But I will say this. I think in Reyes, Saliba and Gabriel, I was thinking they have one of the great stable triangles of defence in European football just now. The two centre-backs, of course, complement each other extraordinarily well. So I think the injury to Gabriel, it could even be the thing that tips this tie. I think it's reduced Arsenal's chances significantly.
Yeah, I agree with you, Danny. And I was at the Arsenal game with Fulham last Tuesday, and the collective sigh when Gabriel hit the deck, because you knew straight away that he was done. And done as in out of the Real Madrid game as well. Now, of course, there was that weird situation where the game carried on for about 3.5 minutes because they couldn't get it out of play. Well, firstly, they didn't want to get it out of play because they were attacking Arsenal. And then they couldn't get it out of play because Fulham, not unreasonably given that, didn't want to put it out of play. So he had to carry on. And I think that, you know, some people were worried about it getting worse. It couldn't get worse. It was clear from the way he went down and the fact he was in big distress straight away that he was done for both of these games. So that is really tough for Arsenal to take. And I think from a neutral perspective, you know, you want to see the best taking on the best. So it's a real shame. Of course, the fact that Kylian Mbappe is peaking at absolutely the right time is a real thing as well. But having said that, why don't we move away from Arsenal's defensive problems and look at Real Madrid's defensive problems?
Threadbare.
Though, yeah, and you know they've had to play with a patchwork defence for a lot of this season, which has been a big thing. And really, that has been the problem for them, the lack of rhythm, really, for that. Now, Federico Valverde, who I think is a really interesting name in our poll of tonight on TalkSport.com of who is Real Madrid's most important player of the moment. I understand making the case for Valverde, but a little bit like prime Michael Essien for Chelsea, you know he can do a great job in other spots. You stick him at right back, he's great. Stick him at centre-back when he was in place of John Terry. He's great. But how much do you miss him in midfield? And that is always the thing with Valverde. The worst I've seen Real Madrid play this season is the hour at Anfield when they had Valverde at right-back. Because Valverde is an incapable right-back? No, because they missed him in midfield. That's why. Yeah. So
they robbed Peter to pay Paul and it didn't work.
Yes, exactly, and that is the problem. They need him in his spot. You know, you think that Ancelotti's used him sometimes in that Rodrigo spot on the right-hand side, a sort of almost a right-sided forward to do a sort of defensive role there. A little bit like if you go back to the 2017 Champions League winning Real Madrid side when Isco, if you like, was, because he was so good off the ball, was like a defensive number 10 as well, and that's why he was playing instead of, say, James Rodriguez. He was brilliant in the second half of that season, and really nice to see him doing well at Betis again now, and hopefully we'll see him back in the Champions League next season. But look, Real Madrid have got holes as well. To me, this tie just screams goals, and I really hope that is the case. But look, for Arsenal, I wouldn't go as far as to say this is a free hit. But you look at where they were last season, they hadn't been in the Champions League for, 6 years, and they were disappointed to go out to Bayern in the quarter-final, despite the fact they only went out narrowly. Now this time, they're playing the team that, if they don't win it, they always go pretty close. So to be able to take them on and to be able to have a proper go at them. And you talked about Saka's injury. Well, there's a guy who always desperately needed a rest who has been forced to have one. I remember saying to a friend who I went to an Arsenal supporting friend who I went to the game with last week, I mean, this is surely the plan. Give him 25 minutes against Fulham, then give him some more game time at the weekend, and then watch him have a proper go at Real Madrid next week.
And
no exaggeration
defense.
to say.
Absolutely.
It's no exaggeration to say he could be a pivotal player in this tie.
The other tie sees Bayern Munich against Inter. Now, look, Inter showed last year just what a fiercely competitive team they are in tournament football. And Bayern, as we said at the top of the show, have, in Musiala's injury, been struck at yet another blow to their starting 11. They do have an amazing squad, though. More than any other team, I think, in Europe, they have 2 players for every position. But this is more even than it might have been before the injury started to pile up for Bayern Munich. I mean, by the way, I'm not picking a winner this time because I haven't got a clue.
I'm going Inter. I think.
Wow.
And I would have gone for them before the Musiala injury, to be honest. Inter have got an itch that they need to scratch in the Champions League. There's no doubt about it. And what Inter have lacked in dazzle in the biggest games this season, I think they can maybe make up for in the fact that they're defensively sound. I think that's important. Now, in the game that I saw them at, and I've seen these teams firsthand both quite recently, I think the good thing about Inter is they've missed a few players as well. Now, you look at partly through injury, partly through suspension, partly through choice. The players that missed that derby in the week at Milan, they had no Lautaro, they had no Sommer, they had no Dumfries, they had no Di Marco. They were missing a load of players, and they just dealt with it. It's fine, yeah. Honestly, and I think to be able to get past that, and obviously everything that they've been doing in terms of Inzaghi letting Lautaro take his time so he's absolutely ready for this quarter-final. I think you add that, plus good Thuram, plus the fact that Bayern have these defensive problems, to me that immediately makes Inter the favourites before you even get to the Musiala bit. And the Musiala thing is an absolute killer for them. You may remember, like early in the season, when Simon Rolfes, the sporting director of Leverkusen, thought that Karl-Heinz Rummenigge was trying to upset Leverkusen by saying, well, of course Bayern want Florian Wirtz. He is the best player in Germany. Of course he interests us. The bit that I found interesting about that is the fact that if I was Jamal Musiala, I'd be saying, he's the best player in Germany.
Hold the bus.
What does that make me? How dare you?
Hold some autobus.
Yeah. I think you owe me an extra 0 on that new contract. But, I think Musiala is totally irreplaceable. And there have been moments over the last couple of years when even when he was slightly younger and slightly greener, they have needed him to step up and cover up their shortcomings. Now, of course, the other problem with Bayern, and this is before you even got to Davies going down and Upamecano going down, the problem is that they've been leaking goals left and right for the last couple of months. And that is a real issue, and not against great opposition sometimes. They let in 3 against Bochum, they let in 2 against St. Pauli, who never score unless it's Dapo scoring from miles out. The sort of teams they should not be. Holstein Kiel they conceded 3 goals to. That shouldn't be happening. And then, of course, Manuel Neuer's not there. So I think there are a lot of reasons why Bayern are going to find this very, very difficult. They just need Michael Olise to have the game of his life, basically.
Sure, and we can always rely on Harry Kane to score at some stage in 3 hours of football. The problem is, can he do it enough against the absolute array of brilliant centre-backs that Inter Milan seem to be able to, rotate game after game after game? It should be a fascinating tie.
On AM, on DAB, via the TalkSport app and on your smart speaker. TalkSport.